Marcus Henderson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided his old tractor across the cornfield. The summer heat was brutal, but the crops needed tending. He had been farming this land for 23 years, ever since his father passed and left him the family farm. The work was hard, but it was honest, and Marcus took pride in feeding people. As he turned the tractor around the far corner of his property, something metallic caught his eye. Half buried in the dirt near the old oak tree was what looked like a large, rusted chunk of metal. Marcus had plowed this field hundreds of times, but he had never seen this object before. The recent heavy rains must have washed away enough soil to expose it. Marcus stopped the tractor and climbed down to investigate. The object was roughly oval-shaped, about the size of a small car, and covered in a strange rust that seemed to shimmer with an oily rainbow sheen. The metal underneath looked like nothing he had ever seen before. It was too smooth, too perfect, with curves that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. He ran his calloused hands over the surface, feeling odd bumps and indentations that might have been controls or decorations. There were no visible seams or openings, but Marcus could tell this was definitely some kind of container or vessel. His first thought was that it might be an old military prototype that had crashed decades ago, maybe during the Cold War. Marcus tried to lift one end of the object, but it was incredibly heavy. Even with his farmer's strength, he could barely budge it. He would need help to move this thing, but who could he call? His nearest neighbor was old Pete Morrison, who lived 2 miles down the road. Pete had a bigger tractor and some heavy equipment that might do the job. As Marcus walked back to his house to make the phone call, his mind raced with possibilities. Maybe this was worth something to collectors or museums. Lord knew he could use the money. The farm had been struggling lately, with crop prices down and equipment costs up. His wife Sarah had been talking about selling the land and moving to the city, but Marcus could not bear the thought of giving up the family legacy. Pete arrived an hour later with his son Danny in a heavy-duty trailer. The 3 men worked together in the fading daylight, using chains and Pete's powerful tractor to pull the mysterious object from the earth. It came free with a wet sucking sound, leaving behind a perfect oval depression in the black soil. "What do you think it is, Marcus?" Pete asked, running his hand through his gray beard as he examined the strange metal surface. "Could be an old airplane part," Marcus replied, though he did not really believe it himself, maybe from a crash that happened before we were born. Danny, who was 25 and fresh out of college, shook his head. "Dad, I've never seen metal like this before. Look at how it reflects the light. And feel how warm it is, even though it's been buried in cold dirt." The young man was right. The object radiated a gentle warmth that seemed to come from within. Marcus had noticed it when he first touched the surface, but he had attributed it to the summer heat. Now, in the cool evening air, the warmth was unmistakable. They loaded the object onto Pete's trailer and hauled it to Marcus's barn. As they unloaded it using the barn's old pulley system, Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation in his hands whenever he touched the metal. It was not unpleasant, just unusual, like a very mild electric current. "You planning to keep this thing?" Pete asked as they settled the object on the barn floor. "For now," Marcus said. "I want to do some research, maybe find out what it really is before I decide what to do with it." After Pete and Danny left, Marcus stood alone in the barn with his discovery. The object seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, though that might have been his imagination. He had always been a practical man, not given to flights of fancy, but something about this find felt significant. It felt like his life was about to change in ways he could not yet understand. Sarah came out to the barn after dinner carrying 2 cups of coffee. She was a small woman with kind eyes and graying brown hair, and she had stood by Marcus through all the difficult years of farming. "So this is the treasure you dug up today?" she said, looking skeptically at the rusted metal hulk. "I think it might be something special," Marcus said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Sarah walked around the object, studying it from different angles. "It's certainly unusual," she admitted. "But Marcus, you know how people in town talk. If word gets out that you're keeping some strange piece of junk in your barn, they'll say you've finally lost your mind." Marcus nodded. The people of Millfield were good folks, but they were also traditional and suspicious of anything out of the ordinary. They already thought he was stubborn for refusing to sell the farm and move to more profitable work. If they saw this object, they would probably assume he had gone crazy. "Let's keep it quiet for now," he said. "I'll do some research online, maybe contact some experts. If it turns out to be nothing special, we can always scrap it for the metal." But as Marcus locked up the barn that night, he could not shake the feeling that the object was watching him. When he turned off the lights, he could swear he saw a faint pulse of illumination from within the rusted metal shell. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, listening to the night sounds of crickets and distant traffic. Tomorrow he would begin trying to uncover the truth about his discovery. He had no idea that his life, and the lives of everyone in Millfield, were about to be transformed forever. The rusted object in his barn was not just a piece of forgotten military hardware or industrial waste. It was something far more extraordinary and far more dangerous than Marcus Henderson could possibly imagine. Marcus spent the next 3 days researching everything he could find about unusual metal objects and military aircraft. He searched the internet for hours, looking through government databases, military history sites, and even conspiracy theory forums. Nothing matched what he had found in his field. The object's metal composition baffled him. It looked rusted, but when he scraped at the surface with a knife, the blade barely left a mark. The rust seemed to be part of the metal itself, not a coating that had formed over time. And the warmth continued to radiate from within, even on cool mornings when everything else in the barn was cold. On Thursday morning, Marcus was examining the object when he noticed something new. What he had initially thought were random bumps and indentations on the surface now seemed to form patterns. They reminded him of writing, but in no language he recognized. The symbols were flowing and organic, like something grown rather than carved. He was so absorbed in tracing these patterns with his finger that he did not hear the barn door open behind him. "Marcus Henderson, what in the Sam Hill are you doing?" Marcus spun around to find Betty Williams standing in the doorway. Betty ran the local newspaper and had a nose for gossip that could smell a story from 3 counties away. She was a small, energetic woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Hello, Betty," Marcus said, trying to position himself between her and the object. "Just working on some farm equipment." Betty pushed past him with the determination of a woman who had spent 40 years getting stories out of reluctant sources. When she saw the object, her eyes widened. "Good Lord, Marcus, what is that thing?" "Just some old metal I dug up," Marcus said weakly. "Probably fell off a truck years ago." Betty walked around the object, her reporter's instincts immediately recognizing that this was no ordinary piece of scrap metal. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. "Betty, please don't," Marcus said. "It's really nothing interesting." "Nothing interesting?" Betty laughed. "Marcus, I've been covering news in this town for 4 decades, and I've never seen anything like this. This metal is beautiful under all that rust. And feel how warm it is." She reached out to touch the surface, and the moment her fingers made contact, something extraordinary happened. The symbols on the object began to glow with a soft blue-white light. The light pulsed gently like a heartbeat, and a low humming sound filled the barn. Both Marcus and Betty jumped back in surprise. The glowing continued for about 10 seconds, then gradually faded until the object looked normal again. But the humming sound continued so quiet they had to strain to hear it. "Marcus," Betty whispered, "what did we just see?" "I don't know," Marcus replied honestly. His heart was pounding and his hands were shaking slightly. "It's never done that before." Betty immediately started taking more pictures, but the object remained dormant. No amount of touching or prodding could make it glow again. "This is incredible," Betty said, her journalist's excitement overriding her fear. "Marcus, you found something amazing here. This isn't from Earth, is it?" Marcus wanted to deny it, but the evidence was becoming hard to ignore. The strange metal, the warmth, the glowing symbols, the humming sound. None of it made sense if this was human technology. "I don't know what it is," he said. "But Betty, please don't write about this yet. Let me figure out what we're dealing with first." Betty looked at him with sympathy. She had known Marcus since he was a boy, and she understood his cautious nature, but she also knew a story when she saw one. "Marcus, this is the biggest thing to happen in Millfield since the tornado of '98. I can't just ignore it." "Just give me a week," Marcus pleaded. "1 week to do more research. Then you can write whatever you want." Betty considered this. She could publish the story immediately and probably win some journalism awards, but she also respected Marcus and did not want to cause him trouble. 3 days, she said finally. "I'll give you 3 days, but then I'm running the story whether you like it or not." After Betty left, Marcus sat in the barn staring at the object. The humming had stopped, but he could still feel the warmth radiating from its surface. He was in over his head and he knew it. This was not just some piece of space junk or experimental aircraft. This was something that responded to human touch, something that was somehow alive. That evening, Marcus called his brother David, who worked as an engineer for NASA in Houston. David was 10 years younger and had always been the smart one in the family. If anyone could help him understand what he had found, it would be David. Marcus. David's voice was surprised when he answered the phone. The brothers did not talk often. Is everything okay? David, I need your help with something, but you have to promise to keep it quiet. Marcus described his discovery, leaving out the glowing and humming parts. Even to his own brother, it sounded crazy. So you want me to analyze some metal you found? David said. Marcus, I work on spacecraft, not farming equipment. This isn't farming equipment, Marcus said. David, I think this might be something that fell from space. There was a long pause. Are you serious? Dead serious. The metal is like nothing I've ever seen. It's warm to the touch and the composition looks completely foreign. David was quiet for a moment, thinking. Okay, he said finally. I can't come up there right now, but I could analyze a sample if you can get one to me. Can you chip off a piece? I've tried, Marcus said. The metal won't cut or break. It's incredibly hard. Interesting, David mused. That actually supports your theory. A lot of meteorites are much harder than terrestrial metals. Look, I'll make some calls and see if I can find someone who specializes in this kind of thing. After they hung up, Marcus felt slightly better. At least now he had someone with scientific training taking him seriously. But he still had not told David about the glowing symbols or the humming sound. Some things were just too incredible to share over the phone. As he locked up the barn that night, Marcus noticed that the object was glowing again, very faintly. The light was so dim he might have missed it if the barn had not been completely dark. It pulsed slowly and rhythmically, like something breathing in a deep sleep. Marcus stood watching for several minutes, feeling a strange sense of connection to the object. Whatever it was, wherever it had come from, it was now his responsibility, and he was beginning to suspect that responsibility was going to be bigger than anything he had ever faced before. The next morning brought unwelcome visitors. Marcus was having breakfast when he saw two black SUVs pulling into his driveway. Men in dark suits got out and began walking toward his house with the purposeful stride of federal agents. Marcus's blood ran cold. Someone had talked. Either Betty had broken her promise or word had leaked some other way. He quickly texted Sarah, who was at work in town, telling her to stay away from the farm until he called her. The lead agent was a tall, thin man with pale skin and cold gray eyes. He flashed his credentials as Marcus opened the front door. Mr. Henderson, I'm Agent Collins with the Department of Energy. We understand you may have found some radioactive material on your property. Radioactive? Marcus tried to keep his voice steady. I haven't found anything like that. We have reports of unusual metallic objects that may pose a health hazard. Agent Collins continued. We need to inspect your property to ensure your safety and the safety of your neighbors. Marcus knew he had no choice but to cooperate. Refusing would only make them more suspicious. He led the agents to the barn, his mind racing as he tried to figure out how to explain what they were about to see. When the barn doors opened, 4 agents immediately began photographing and scanning the object with various electronic devices. Marcus watched their faces carefully, looking for signs of recognition or surprise. Interesting composition, one of the younger agents said, reading from his scanner. The metal is definitely not radioactive, but it's not showing up in our database either. Agent Collins walked around the object slowly, examining it from every angle. Mr. Henderson, where exactly did you find this? Marcus pointed toward the field. About 50 yards from the old oak tree. It was buried maybe 3 feet down. And you moved it here by yourself? I had help from my neighbor, Marcus admitted. We'll need to speak with your neighbor as well, Collins said, making a note. How long has this object been on your property? I just found it a few days ago after the heavy rains washed away some soil. The agents continued their examination for another hour, taking measurements and samples. Marcus was relieved that the object remained dormant throughout their visit. No glowing, no humming, no sign of the incredible events he and Betty had witnessed. Mr. Henderson, Agent Collins said finally, we're going to need to remove this object for further analysis. It may contain hazardous materials. Am I in trouble? Marcus asked. Not at all. You did the right thing by not disturbing it further. We'll have a removal team here tomorrow morning. After the agents left, Marcus sat on his porch feeling defeated. His discovery was about to be taken away by the government, and he would probably never learn the truth about what he had found. Worse, if the object really was something extraordinary, it would disappear into some classified facility and never be seen again. He was still sitting there when Pete Morrison's truck pulled into the driveway. Pete got out and walked over with a worried expression on his weathered face. "Marcus, I just had some government folks at my place asking questions about that thing we dug up," Pete said. "They wanted to know everything about how we found it and moved it." "They were here too," Marcus said. "They're coming back tomorrow to take it away." Pete sat down in the other porch chair and was quiet for a moment. "You know, Marcus, that thing we found isn't natural. I've been thinking about it for days and nothing about it makes sense." "What do you mean?" "Well, for one thing, it was buried exactly 3 feet down all the way across. Like it was placed there, not like it fell from the sky or got washed there by floodwater. And the soil around it was different, darker and richer than the rest of your field." Marcus had not noticed these details, but Pete was a careful observer who had been farming even longer than Marcus. "And another thing," Pete continued. "When we were moving it, I noticed that it wasn't just warm. It was the exact same temperature as human body heat. That's too specific to be a coincidence." That evening, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He could not let the government take the object without learning what it really was. If it contained some kind of intelligence or technology that could help humanity, it was too important to disappear into a classified program. He waited until after midnight, then slipped out to the barn with a toolkit and a battery-powered lantern. The object was glowing faintly again, pulsing with that slow, rhythmic light. Marcus approached it carefully and placed both hands on its surface. "I don't know if you can understand me," he whispered, "but they're going to take you away tomorrow. If you're trying to communicate, now would be a good time." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The object erupted in brilliant blue-white light, and the humming sound became a complex harmony of tones. The symbols on its surface blazed like stars, and Marcus felt a tingling sensation that spread from his hands up his arms and throughout his entire body. Then suddenly, he was not in the barn anymore. Marcus found himself standing in what appeared to be the interior of a vast spacecraft. The walls were made of the same strange metal as the object, but they glowed with a soft, living light. Strange symbols flowed across the surfaces like water, constantly changing and rearranging themselves. In the center of the space stood a figure that was clearly not human, but not entirely alien either. It was tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that radiated intelligence and kindness. When it spoke, Marcus heard the words directly in his mind rather than through his ears. "Greetings, Marcus Henderson of Earth. I am Zara 7 of the Kepler Collective. I have been waiting for someone like you to find my pod." "Someone like me?" Marcus managed to think back. "Someone with the right combination of curiosity, courage, and compassion. Your species is being evaluated, Marcus. My people have been watching Earth for many years, studying your development and trying to decide whether humanity is ready to join the greater galactic community." The vision was incredibly vivid, but Marcus could still feel his hands pressed against the warm metal in his barn. Somehow he was experiencing two realities at once. "The pod you found contains a test," Zara 7 continued. "It responds to the touch and intentions of those who find it. Most species fail this test because they approach with greed, fear, or a desire to use the technology for violence. But you, Marcus, have approached with wonder and respect." "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now the real test begins. Tomorrow your government will try to take the pod. How you and your people handle that situation will determine whether humanity passes or fails the evaluation." The vision began to fade, and Marcus found himself back in the barn. The object was still glowing, but the light was softer now, more peaceful. Marcus understood that something momentous was about to happen, and that somehow a simple farmer from Millfield was at the center of it all. Marcus barely slept that night. The vision of Zara 7 felt more real than his own memories, and the implications terrified him. If what he had experienced was true, then the fate of all humanity might depend on what happened in the next few hours. At dawn, he called Pete and asked him to come over immediately. When Pete arrived, Marcus told him everything: the glowing symbols, the humming sounds, and the incredible vision in the alien spacecraft. "Marcus," Pete said slowly, "that's either the most amazing thing I've ever heard, or you've had some kind of breakdown. I know how it sounds, Marcus replied. But Pete, I need you to trust me. Something big is about to happen and we need to be ready. Pete studied his friend's face carefully. Marcus Henderson was the most level-headed man he knew, not given to flights of fancy or wild stories. If Marcus said something extraordinary had happened, Pete was inclined to believe him. What do you need me to do? Help me move the pod before the government agents get here. I think I know a place where we can hide it. They worked quickly, using Pete's equipment to load the object onto a flatbed trailer. The pod seemed lighter than before, as if it was cooperating with their efforts. They drove deep into the woods behind Marcus's property, to an old limestone cave that had been used by bootleggers during Prohibition. As they maneuvered the pod into the cave, it began to glow more brightly. The symbols on its surface swirled and rearranged themselves, and Marcus felt that tingling sensation again. Pete, he said urgently, touch the pod. Are you crazy? Trust me. Touch it. Pete reluctantly placed his hand on the warm metal surface. Immediately, his eyes went wide and unfocused. Marcus knew he was experiencing the same vision that had come to him the night before. After a few minutes, Pete stumbled backward, his face pale with shock. Dear God, he whispered. It's real. It's all real. They covered the pod with old tarps and brush, then hurried back to the farm just as the government convoy was arriving. This time there were more vehicles, trucks with specialized equipment and a team of technicians in hazmat suits. Agent Collins approached Marcus with a stern expression. Mr. Henderson, where's the object? What object? Marcus asked innocently. Don't play games with me. Our sensors detected unusual energy readings from your barn yesterday. Now we're getting nothing. I moved it, Marcus said. I was worried about radiation. Collins' face darkened. Mr. Henderson, interfering with a federal investigation is a serious crime. I need you to tell me exactly where that object is right now. I buried it, Marcus lied. Out in the back 40 somewhere. I can't remember exactly where. For the next 6 hours, the federal team searched Marcus's property with metal detectors and ground-penetrating radar. They found nothing, of course, but their increasingly frustrated efforts attracted attention from the local community. Betty Williams arrived first, followed by other neighbors who had heard rumors about government agents at the Henderson farm. Soon there were dozens of people watching the search from the property line. What are they looking for? Asked Dr. Sarah Chen, who ran the local medical clinic. Some kind of military hardware, Betty said, taking pictures of the search teams. But Marcus found something a lot more interesting than that. By afternoon, the crowd had grown to include most of the town. People brought folding chairs and coolers, turning the search into an impromptu community gathering. Agent Collins was clearly frustrated by the spectacle, but there was nothing he could do to disperse the crowd as long as they stayed off Marcus's property. That evening, after the federal team had left empty-handed, Marcus gathered with a small group of trusted friends and neighbors in Pete's barn. Betty was there, along with Dr. Chen, Pastor Williams from the Methodist Church, and Tom Bradley, who taught science at the high school. I need to tell you all something that's going to sound completely impossible, Marcus began. He told them about the pod, the visions, and the alien evaluation of humanity. To his surprise, most of them listened with open minds. Marcus, Dr. Chen said thoughtfully, I've been a doctor for 20 years, and I've learned not to dismiss things just because they seem impossible. If you say you've made contact with an alien intelligence, I'm willing to consider it. But what does it want from us? Pastor Williams asked. It wants to see how we handle first contact, Marcus explained. Whether we approach it with fear and greed, or with curiosity and wisdom. Tom Bradley, the science teacher, was practically vibrating with excitement. Marcus, do you realize what this means? This could be the most important moment in human history. That night, Marcus led the small group to the cave where they had hidden the pod. When they arrived, they found the alien device glowing brightly, as if it had been waiting for them. One by one, each person touched the pod and experienced their own vision of Zara 7. Dr. Chen saw medical technologies that could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Tom Bradley witnessed educational systems that could unlock human potential in ways he had never imagined. Pastor Williams experienced a profound spiritual connection that transcended religious boundaries. Betty Williams, ever the journalist, asked the most direct questions. What happens if we fail your test? She thought to Zara 7 during her vision. Then we wait, came the reply. Perhaps in another century or two, your species will be ready. But if you pass, if you show that humanity can approach the unknown with wisdom rather than fear, then we will share our knowledge and welcome you into the galactic community. And what would that mean? Technologies to heal your planet's environmental damage, medical advances to eliminate suffering, energy systems that would end scarcity, and most importantly, the knowledge that you are not alone in the universe. When Betty's vision ended, she looked around at the group with tears in her eyes. "We can't let the government lock this away," she said. "This belongs to all of humanity," Marcus nodded. "But how do we share it without causing panic? How do we prove what we've experienced?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The pod itself began to project images into the air above it, holographic recordings of Earth from space, showing the planet's beauty and fragility. Then came images of other worlds, other civilizations that had passed the test and joined the galactic community. "It's giving us proof," Tom whispered in amazement. "Evidence we can share with the world." But even as they watched the incredible display, Marcus knew their real challenge was just beginning. Agent Collins would be back with more resources and more pressure. The secret was getting harder to keep, and soon they would have to decide whether to reveal the truth to the world. The test that Zara 7 had spoken of was no longer just about how Marcus and his friends responded to the alien pod. It was about how all of humanity would react when they learned they were not alone in the universe, and that test was about to begin. The decision to go public came sooner than anyone expected. 3 days after the government search, Agent Collins returned with a court order and a much larger team. This time, they brought excavation equipment and declared Marcus's entire property a potential hazmat site. "You have 24 hours to evacuate," Collins told Marcus and Sarah as they stood on their front porch. "We're going to dig up every square inch of this farm until we find what we're looking for." Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm. "They can't just take our home," she said. "Actually, they can," Collins replied coldly. "National security trumps property rights, Mrs. Henderson." That evening, the core group met again in the cave. The pod seemed to sense the urgency of the situation, glowing more brightly than ever before. "We're out of time," Marcus said. "If we're going to do this, it has to be now." Betty pulled out her laptop and began typing. "I've been working on the story for 3 days. I have all the photos, all the documentation. If I publish this online tonight, it'll be all over the world by morning." "Are we sure about this?" Dr. Chen asked. "Once this information is out there, we can't take it back." Pastor Williams spoke up. "I've been praying about this for days, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. If God has given us this opportunity to help humanity move forward, then hiding it would be a sin." Tom Bradley nodded enthusiastically. "The scientific implications alone are worth any risk. This could advance human knowledge by centuries." Pete, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, finally spoke. "I've been farming this land for 40 years. I've seen droughts, floods, economic crashes, and all kinds of hardship. But I've also seen this community come together when times get tough. If we're going to share this with the world, we need to do it right." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "I mean, we don't just dump this information and run. We take responsibility for it. We show the world how ordinary people can handle extraordinary situations with wisdom and courage." Marcus touched the pod one more time, feeling that familiar tingling sensation. In his mind, he could sense Zara 7's presence waiting and watching. "Are we ready?" he thought. "The question is not whether you are ready," came the reply. "The question is whether your species is ready. But based on what I have observed from your group, there is reason for hope." Betty finished her article and looked around the group. "Last chance to change our minds," she said. "Publish it," Marcus said firmly. Betty hit the send button, uploading the story to every major news outlet and social media platform she could think of. Within minutes, her article first contact in a small town. The Henderson Farm alien pod was spreading across the internet like wildfire. The headline read, "Local farmer discovers alien technology in his cornfield," complete with photos and video evidence. The story included everything: the discovery, the government investigation, the visions, and most importantly, the holographic projections that the pod had displayed. Betty had managed to record several minutes of the alien images on her phone, providing visual proof that was impossible to dismiss as a hoax. By midnight, the story had been shared over 1 million times. News crews were already driving toward Millfield from cities across the region. The phone at Marcus's house rang constantly with calls from reporters, scientists, and government officials. Agent Collins arrived at 2 a.m. with a team of federal marshals, but it was too late. The story was already global news, and trying to suppress it now would only make the government look guilty of a cover-up. "You have no idea what you've done," Collins told Marcus as they stood in the farm's driveway, surrounded by satellite trucks and news crews. "I know exactly what I've done," Marcus replied calmly. "I've given humanity a chance to prove we're ready for something bigger than ourselves." By dawn, Millfield was the center of the world's attention. Reporters, scientists, government officials, and curious citizens descended on the small town in unprecedented numbers. The local diner ran out of food by 8 a.m., and the gas station had lines stretching for blocks. But something remarkable happened that Agent Collins and his superiors had not expected. Instead of panic or chaos, the global response was overwhelmingly positive. Scientists around the world called for open international cooperation in studying the pod. Religious leaders spoke of the discovery as a sign of humanity's readiness to expand its understanding of creation. Even world leaders who rarely agreed on anything issued joint statements calling for peaceful, collaborative investigation. Dr. James Mueller, a xenobiologist from Stanford, arrived on the second day with a team of researchers. Instead of trying to seize control of the pod, he asked Marcus for permission to study it. "This is your discovery, Mr. Henderson," Dr. Mueller said. "We're here to help you understand it, not to take it away from you." The pod seemed to respond to this collaborative approach. When the international team of scientists gathered around it in the cave, it produced its most spectacular display yet. Holographic star charts appeared in the air, showing the locations of other inhabited worlds. Complex mathematical equations demonstrated faster-than-light travel principles. Medical data revealed treatments for cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and dozens of other conditions. But the most important message came when Dr. Mueller, representing the global scientific community, placed his hand on the pod and asked Zara 7 directly, "What do you need from us to proceed?" "You have already done what was needed," came the reply. "You have shown that your species can put aside fear, greed, and nationalism when faced with something greater than yourselves. You have chosen cooperation over competition, knowledge over power. Does this mean we've passed your test?" "The first test, yes. But true membership in the galactic community requires ongoing demonstration of wisdom and compassion. Consider this the beginning of a very long journey." As the days passed, Millfield became a model for how humanity could handle extraordinary situations. People from around the world came not just to see the pod, but to witness how a small farming community had responded to first contact with grace, wisdom, and unity. The Henderson farm was declared an international heritage site, with Marcus and Sarah as its official guardians. The pod remained in the cave, but it was now accessible to researchers and visitors from around the world through a carefully managed program that respected both the alien technology and the local community. Marcus found himself traveling to universities and conferences, sharing his experience and helping others understand that first contact was not something to be feared, but something to be approached with the same careful thought and community cooperation that had made the Millfield response so successful. But even as the world celebrated this new chapter in human history, Marcus knew that the real work was just beginning. Zara 7 had made it clear that joining the galactic community would require humanity to solve many of its own problems first. The pod was not just a gift of technology, it was a challenge to become worthy of the knowledge it contained. And in a small farming town in the middle of nowhere, that challenge was being met one day at a time, with the same practical wisdom and community spirit that had made the discovery possible in the first place. 6 months after the discovery, Millfield had transformed from a struggling farming community into a thriving center of international cooperation and research. The small town now hosted the Earth-Kepler Collective Communications Center, a joint facility operated by scientists from every major nation on Earth. Marcus walked through the research center early one morning, still amazed by how much had changed. Where once there had been empty storefronts and struggling businesses, now there were laboratories, dormitories for visiting researchers, and cafes serving food from around the world. The local economy had not just survived, it had flourished, but the changes went deeper than economics. The pod's influence had sparked a global renaissance of cooperation and scientific advancement. Countries that had been enemies for decades were now working together to understand the alien technology. The United Nations had established a new department dedicated to interstellar relations, with its headquarters right here in Millfield. Dr. Sarah Chen had been promoted to director of the new International Medical Research Division, where she led teams studying the healing technologies that Zara 7 had shared. Early clinical trials were already showing remarkable results in treating previously incurable diseases. Tom Bradley now ran the most advanced educational program on Earth, using teaching methods inspired by alien learning systems. Students from around the world came to study in Millfield, returning to their home countries with new ways of thinking about science, cooperation, and problem-solving. Even Pastor Williams had found his calling transformed. The church now hosted weekly discussions about the spiritual implications of life beyond Earth, drawing theologians and philosophers from every major religion. Far from weakening faith, the discovery had strengthened it, showing that the universe was even more magnificent and purposeful than anyone had imagined. But it was Pete Morrison who had perhaps made the most important contribution. His practical farming wisdom had inspired a new approach to agriculture that was being implemented worldwide. Using principles learned from the pod's environmental data, farmers were beginning to heal damaged soil and grow crops in previously barren areas. The pod itself had become more active as human understanding grew. It now communicated regularly with the research teams, providing new information as humanity demonstrated its readiness to handle it responsibly. The alien device seemed to be monitoring not just the Millfield community, but global progress toward the values that Zara 7 had described. Marcus found himself in an unexpected role as humanity's unofficial ambassador to the Kepler Collective. Through the pod, he had regular conversations with Zara 7 and other alien representatives. These beings shared news from across the galaxy, describing other worlds that had successfully joined the interstellar community. "Your species is progressing faster than we expected," Zara 7 told him during one of these sessions. "The rapid global adoption of cooperative principles has impressed the Collective Council." "We still have a long way to go," Marcus replied through the mental link. "There's still conflict, still inequality, still environmental damage. Of course, these problems are not solved overnight, even among the most advanced civilizations. What matters is that you have chosen to work together toward solutions rather than allowing fear and division to dominate your response to new knowledge." The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Muller, who approached with barely contained excitement. "Marcus, we've just received a message from the International Space Station. They're detecting something approaching Earth. Multiple objects, definitely artificial." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. "More pods?" "Bigger, much bigger. The ISS crew says they look like ships." Within hours, the news had spread around the world. Telescopes and satellites confirmed the approach of 3 large vessels, each roughly the size of a city block. They moved with purpose toward Earth, decelerating as they approached the planet's gravity well. Global leaders convened emergency sessions, but the tone was remarkably different from what it might have been 6 months earlier. Instead of panic and military preparation, the discussions focused on how to welcome the visitors appropriately. The ships took up positions in stable orbits around Earth, and within hours the pod in Millfield was glowing more brightly than it ever had before. When Marcus approached it, Zara 7's presence felt stronger and more immediate than ever. "The Council has decided to proceed to the next phase," she communicated. "We are sending delegations to establish formal diplomatic relations with your world. Are we ready for that?" Marcus asked. "The Millfield response has convinced us that your species has the potential for galactic citizenship. But this will be the final test. How your world handles face-to-face contact with multiple alien civilizations will determine whether Earth is invited to join the collective or whether we must wait for further development." The first alien shuttles landed 3 days later, touching down in a specially prepared area adjacent to the research center. The beings who emerged were not just Kepler Collective members like Zara 7, but representatives from 3 different star systems, each with their own unique appearance and culture. Marcus was chosen to lead the human delegation that would greet them. As he walked across the field toward the landing site, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been a struggling farmer worried about losing his land. Now he was about to participate in the most important diplomatic event in human history. The alien representatives were even more impressive in person than they had been in the visions. Besides Zara 7, there was Korath, a tall, crystalline being from a silicon-based civilization, and Telvari, whose species had evolved from oceanic creatures and wore specialized suits to survive in Earth's atmosphere. Marcus Henderson of Earth, Zara 7 said, speaking aloud for the first time. Her voice was musical and strangely soothing. "It is an honor to meet you in person." "The honor is mine," Marcus replied, extending his hand in greeting. Zara 7 clasped it gently, and Marcus felt that familiar tingling sensation, but stronger now, more joyful. "Your world has surprised us," Korath said, his voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Most species require centuries to move from first contact to interstellar readiness. You have made that journey in months." Telvari's translator device rendered her aquatic language into English. "The Collective Council has voted. Earth is to be offered provisional membership in the galactic community, with full membership to be confirmed after a period of successful integration." The formal ceremonies continued for hours, with representatives from every nation on Earth participating via video link. But for Marcus, the most meaningful moment came when the 3 alien delegations were given a tour of Millfield itself. They visited the diner where locals had fed thousands of visitors without asking for payment. They saw the school where children from dozens of countries were learning together. They observed the farms where new agricultural techniques were feeding more people while healing the land. "This is why we chose your world," Zara 7 told Marcus as they stood in the very field where the pod had been discovered. "Not because you were perfect, but because when faced with the unknown, you chose hope over fear, cooperation over competition." As the sun set over Millfield that evening, Marcus stood with Sarah on their front porch, watching alien ships glide silently across the sky. It was a sight he was still getting used to, but one that filled him with wonder rather than fear. "Do you ever regret finding that pod?" Sarah asked, taking his hand. Marcus considered the question seriously. Their quiet life had been completely transformed. They were now public figures, their farm was an international landmark, and their daily routine involved conversations with beings from other star systems. "Never," he said finally. "We were given a chance to help humanity take its next big step forward. How could I regret that?" But even as he spoke, Marcus knew that the real work was just beginning. Joining the galactic community would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and new tests of humanity's character. The pod that had started it all was still active, still learning, still evaluating whether the promise shown in Millfield could be sustained on a global scale. The answer to that question would determine not just Earth's future, but its place among the stars. 2 years had passed since the first alien ships arrived at Earth, and Marcus Henderson barely recognized the world around him. The changes went far beyond the obvious technological advances and the alien visitors who now walked among humans in major cities around the globe. The transformation was deeper, more fundamental. Humanity had discovered something about itself that no one had expected. When faced with a challenge that required the entire species to work together, people could put aside their differences and focus on what mattered most. Marcus stood in the upgraded communication chamber that had been built around the original pod. The rusty alien device was now the centerpiece of a sophisticated facility that served as Earth's primary link to the Kepler Collective. Through this connection, human scientists collaborated with researchers from dozens of star systems, sharing knowledge that was advancing every field of human endeavor. The medical breakthroughs alone had revolutionized healthcare. Cancer was becoming as treatable as the common cold. Genetic diseases that had plagued families for generations were being corrected with precision techniques learned from alien biology. Dr. Sarah Chen's team had just announced the successful reversal of Alzheimer's disease in early trials. Using memory restoration technologies provided by the Telvari agricultural improvements based on Korath's crystalline civilization were turning deserts into farmland. Ocean cleanup projects inspired by aquatic alien technologies were restoring marine ecosystems that scientists had thought were beyond saving. The atmospheric processors demonstrated by the Kepler Collective were slowly beginning to reverse climate change. But perhaps the most important change was in how humans approached problems. The Millfield model, as it had come to be known, was being applied to challenges around the world. Instead of competing nations hoarding resources and knowledge, countries were sharing expertise and working together toward common goals. "It's remarkable," Zara 7 said as she materialized in the communication chamber. Her people had developed the ability to project themselves across interstellar distances, allowing for real-time conversations despite the vast distances involved. In just 2 years, your species has made progress that takes most civilizations decades to achieve. Marcus smiled. We had good teachers, and we had the right motivation. The motivation was always there, Zara 7 replied. What you discovered was that cooperation produces better results than competition. That's the fundamental lesson that every species must learn before joining the galactic community. The door to the chamber opened, and Betty Williams entered with her usual purposeful stride. Now in her late 60s, she had become Earth's most respected journalist covering interstellar affairs. Her daily broadcasts were watched by billions of people across the planet and translated into dozens of alien languages for distribution throughout the collective. Marcus, we just received word from the Collective Council, Betty said, her eyes bright with excitement. They're ready to announce their decision about Earth's full membership. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. For 2 years, humanity had been on probation, proving that the promise shown in Millfield could be sustained on a global scale. The evaluation had been thorough and sometimes challenging, with collective observers monitoring everything from international diplomacy to local community responses to change. The 3 of them made their way to the main auditorium, where representatives from every nation on Earth waited alongside alien delegates from throughout the galaxy. The room fell silent as Korath stepped forward to address the assembly. Members of the human species, the crystalline being said, his voice resonating through both sound and harmonic frequencies that touched something deep in the human soul. The Collective Council has completed its evaluation of Earth's readiness for full membership in the galactic community. Marcus held his breath, knowing that this moment would define humanity's future for generations to come. Throughout galactic history, few species have demonstrated such rapid adaptation to interstellar contact. Fewer still have shown the wisdom to use advanced knowledge for the benefit of all, rather than the advantage of a few. The decision is unanimous. Korath paused, and in that silence, Marcus could feel the hopes and dreams of billions of people hanging in the balance. Earth is hereby granted full membership in the Kepler Collective, with all the rights, responsibilities, and opportunities that such membership entails. The auditorium erupted in celebration, with humans and aliens alike expressing joy in their various ways. But Marcus found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment, and about the responsibility that lay ahead. Over the following months, the implications of full membership became clear. Human scientists gained access to the collective's vast libraries of knowledge, accelerating development in every field imaginable. Earth became a hub for interstellar trade and diplomacy, with new cities being built to accommodate visitors from across the galaxy. But the most profound change was in humanity's sense of purpose. No longer confined to a single world, humans began to think of themselves as citizens of the galaxy. Young people competed for positions on the first human crews to serve aboard collective vessels, exploring distant star systems. Earth's universities became interstellar institutions, with students and faculty from dozens of worlds. Marcus found himself appointed as Earth's first galactic ambassador, a role that required him to represent human interests in the Collective Council while also helping other newly contacted species navigate their own paths to membership. It was during one of these diplomatic missions that Marcus encountered the Voth, an aggressive species that had just achieved faster-than-light travel and was demanding immediate recognition as a galactic power. Their response to first contact had been to threaten war if their demands were not met. "You were farmers and primitives just 3 years ago," the Voth leader snarled during negotiations. "What gives you the right to judge our readiness?" Marcus looked across the negotiating table at the reptilian alien, seeing in its eyes the same fear and aggression that humans might have shown if their first contact had been handled differently. "You're right," Marcus said calmly. 3 years ago we were farmers and primitives, but we learned something important when we found that first pod. The measure of a civilization isn't its technology or its military power. It's how it chooses to use whatever capabilities it has. "And what did you choose?" the Voth demanded. "We chose to share our discovery with the world instead of hoarding it. We chose cooperation over competition. We chose to see the unknown as an opportunity rather than a threat." The Voth leader leaned back, considering this. And you believe we should make the same choice? I believe you should make whatever choice you think is best for your people, Marcus replied. But I can tell you what we learned. Fear leads to isolation. Aggression leads to conflict. But cooperation leads to possibilities you can't even imagine. The negotiations continued for days, but gradually, the Voth began to understand what the human example had shown. By the end of the talks, they had agreed to a peaceful integration process, with Marcus serving as their mentor as they learned the same lessons that had transformed Earth. As Marcus returned to Earth after the successful negotiations, he reflected on how far humanity had come. The rusty pod that had once made him the town joke was now the foundation of humanity's place among the stars. But more importantly, it had revealed something fundamental about human nature: the capacity to rise above fear and selfishness when faced with something greater than themselves. The pod still sat in its place of honor in Millfield, now surrounded by a museum and research center that welcomed visitors from across the galaxy. Children from Earth and a dozen other worlds played together in the gardens around the facility, speaking a mixture of languages that represented the new reality of interstellar civilization. Marcus often returned to stand beside the pod, remembering that first night when it had glowed in response to his touch. Zara 7 had told him that the device would remain active as long as humanity continued to demonstrate the wisdom and compassion that had earned them their place in the galactic community. The pod still glowed, pulsing with that familiar gentle light that had first revealed its secrets to a curious farmer, but now that glow represented something more than alien technology. It represented the best of human nature, the willingness to reach out to the unknown with open hands and open hearts. And as long as that light continued to shine, Marcus knew that humanity's greatest adventures among the stars were still ahead of them. The rusted alien pod had not just changed his life or even his world. It had changed what it meant to be human in a universe full of infinite possibilities.